Namaste. Today our special guest, as we have always, is Sri James Bog. I call him Sri, not Mr., because he is very dear to all of us, India and everything. He's one of my long-term friends. We have known each other quite well, and we have a long history of, at least from my side, it's a lot of respect and admiration and special place in my heart. So he's one of my very, very dear friend, and for me, he represents somebody who can be as simple, as innocent, but have reached a very deep depth and a very great height. And I look up to him many, many times, and I see so much learn from him. So having said this, we will see what he has to offer to all of us and to whoever watches this beautiful interview of this beautiful man. Welcome, James. So nice to see you here.
Thank you, Kumar, for such a beautiful introduction. I think much of this is mutual, what you shared. And I also would like to say, to be referred to as Sri James, it's just to me emblematic of part of the beauty of Indian culture that has brought so much to my life.
Yep.
Just this recognition of the beauty in other people. That's all around.
Yes.
So I've been missing India. It's since I first went in 2008. This is, I think, about the longest I've not been back to India because of the restrictions last year. Just yesterday, actually, I was looking at some photographs of last time I was there, including Abhinavagupta.
Yes.
And so it's lovely to have that, to feel that reminder of this, how vital and alive the Indian culture of the respect for all life still is.
Yes.
So thank you for inviting me, Kumar. It's always lovely to be with you.
Wonderful. Wonderful to see and talk to you. To start with, tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up? How was it? What was in your life?
So I think I would say, so I'm speaking from the house I grew up in from age 7. I've spent quite a lot of time back here in the last decade or so, slightly more than that, since 2010, when my mother was diagnosed with a cancer, and I started to come back a lot more to be around my mother and father.
Yeah.
But I think I would say I had a fairly simple childhood, in the sense that I lived in a small place where I had access to the outdoors, and I was able to play with other children quite freely. So that was one thing that, as I have seen the circumstances that other people have maybe grown up in, or that some children experience now, wow, I was lucky to have that chance to just roam in the fields and outside. I also played a lot of sport when I was a boy, like pretty much every day. I loved that physical exuberance and expression. And physical activity outside, especially in the summer, I think it really connected me to this idea of the divine as living beauty. Like, I had some experiences just playing with a ball outside in the summer, and somehow being struck by the beauty of the sky and the land and the field and the feeling of being alive, playing. And like, say, for example, you're playing cricket, you've got to focus on the ball, and like when you chase it's all like, it brings you into the moment. So I feel like, for example, in the realm of yoga, like my first yogic experiences were, not all, but a lot of them were through sports and games that I was, and in a way that I could really enjoy being embodied. And I guess there was quite also in my childhood, my father was a school teacher, so there's quite a lot of emphasis on doing well at school.
Yes.
And I was lucky that I like languages, and the school system uses language quite heavily. And so that part of it I could cope with, and it wasn't such a such a prison for me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I wasn't so keen or so didn't have such a natural affinity for maths, let's say, but it wasn't such a, you know, there were some things in school that I could get along with okay.
Yeah.
So even though I found some things very frustrating, especially being confined to, I did like languages and literature and stories, and so there was something, and sports was available to some degree. So there were some things at school that meant school was not just torment and horror. I enjoyed being with my school friends, and we were able to play sports together, and I enjoyed like the literature and all of that. And one very important thing for me from my childhood was that when I was 11, I started going to France every summer and staying with a French family.
Mm-hmm.
And this I would say was life-changing, because age 11,
Yeah.
I'd been learning French for a year at school, and I like languages a lot, and I was able to get on quite well with that. And when I arrived in France, I had the experience of like, wow, I can see different things, I can experience differently, because I'm experiencing through the lens of this different language, which is a different way of viewing reality. And I also experienced, wow, nobody cares what I did last year, or nobody cares about that embarrassing thing I did when I was 7.
Yeah.
So I experienced these different things. One, how the language allowed a different experience of reality, and also how I could be met as I was here now, not based on who my parents were or what happened last year. And that really sparked, I think when I was 11, I already had a sense I will be leaving England as soon as possible. And I knew I was going to go to other countries. And then I studied French and Italian at university. Yeah. And then I went to France and Italy. And then after that, I went to Asia, and I taught English in Japan. Yeah. Then in Thailand. And when I was in Thailand, that's when I started really practicing and studying yoga. And I was very fortunate to meet a wonderful teacher who'd been around 2 great Indian masters in the 20th century. Mm-hmm. When he spoke about the teachings, they were so practical and so alive. And so I wanted to learn Sanskrit, and teaching at the university in Thailand, I had that chance. Yeah. But I don't know if I would have had that same powerful drive to explore and to go to new languages and new cultures when I was in my early 20s, if I hadn't had that experience when I was 11. Yeah. Of going to, and then every year going to France and experiencing more deeply, wow, there are different ways of looking at reality. This feels different in the different language. And then once I went to Asia, I had very powerful experiences where what I thought was right, everybody else in the room thought was wrong. And what I thought was, oh no, that's terrible, they all thought, no, that's great. Like, oh, okay. So some of these ideas that I have, I realized how conditioned by language and what you might call tradition or culture is. Yeah. And really appreciate, oh, it's really helpful to practice looking in different ways, to try as best as I can to lift myself out of my conditioning and explore what's it like to look in a different way. So I think that also goes back to childhood, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot more I could say, Kumar.
We will come slowly. We will open that aspect and part of it slowly, little by little. And you said you started practicing yoga when you were in Thailand. Mm. So what actually brought you to yoga? Is that the teachers who were talking about their teachers, or?
So the way that it happened was, when I was teaching in Japan, English, I had many colleagues from different parts of the world, also like other people who were teaching English there. And I remember there were quite a few Australian women who I was friends with. And more than one of them, independent of each other, said, oh, I think you'd really like yoga. And like, oh, okay, it was there in my awareness. And it had been in my awareness from quite early on. I'd seen books when I was like 11, 12, with pictures of people doing nauli and this idea of like a kind of a holy man or a meditator or some. That's why I had heard little bits here and there. And when I was a teenager, I played a lot of basketball. And one of my basketball coaches, she taught us to stretch, and she taught us breathing exercises. And when I was on a Sunday, when I was a teenager, I would play basketball twice in the afternoon and again in the evening. In between, I would come home to my bedroom and I would do all these stretches and deep breathing. Yeah. And sometimes then I would also try to sit and meditate. I think maybe I'd seen it in some film or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I can't do it. I can never empty my mind. But also on a Sunday at that time, I would often go to church in the morning and I would carry the cross in the service. And I enjoyed the music. Yeah. And I enjoyed the stepping out of normal busy life. So I had this spiritual inclination, and I'd had this experience that physical disciplines, let's say, were a means to concentrate my being and export me from my day-to-day angst or concerns and invite me into a renewed space. So when I was living in Thailand, I'd been, up to that point in my life, I'd always played a lot of sport, but I found I had some imbalances in my body from that. And I was wanting something that would be more healing. And I was also finding it wasn't always easy to find people to play sports with. Like if you want to play football or basketball, you need to find other people who want to play it in a similar way that you want to play it. Yes. Because, you know, there's lots of ways of playing football and they're not all... Same with cricket, you know, like somebody might, they want to set up the whole pitch and let's do it properly, or, you know, so it's like, I wanted to be more independent and I wanted to nourish my body more. And I also, from my late teenage years, I'd felt like this kind of, I couldn't go to church anymore because I couldn't say the creed. So you say, we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And I thought, like, I don't believe that. Like, I think, you know, the only God I can believe in looks on all of creation. Yeah. Lovingly. Yes. If I'd been born in a Buddhist country, I'd be a Buddhist. If I'd been born in an Islamic country, I'd be a Muslim. Like, what's... Yes. So, so there was these different different things happening. And then I just had, in Thailand, I had friends who went to yoga classes and occasionally I went with them and I like this. This is really helpful. It's helping my body feel more balanced and it's helping my mind feel more calm. This is great. And then one time, some friends said, wow, there's this new yoga studio open, you'll love it. So I went with them one weekend. We'd been out dancing the night before till very late. I ate like a loaf of bread for breakfast and then go straight to this class. And it was an Ashtanga Vinyasa class. Okay. It was very well taught in a very inviting, inclusive way, lots of variations for people. But this teacher was very skilled at kind of allowing the practice to move in a nice flow, but also taking care of everybody. Yeah. I felt great. And I felt so good. I was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. And so then I started practicing pretty much every day. And I started reading about yoga more and more, trying to meditate a bit. And then a couple of years went by. And then I was teaching I moved to Bangkok and I was teaching in university. And I didn't have much time to go to the yoga studio at all. But one day I dropped in and I saw they had this trip on, a weekend away. And I knew that weekend I would have time. I wasn't be marking my students' essays all weekend, as was often the case. And I joined that trip. And that's where I met a man called Larry, who was this direct student of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi back in the 70s, and then became Swami Lakshmanjoo's close disciple later in his life. And he gave a talk that night on yoga, basically from the point of view of Kashmir Shaivism. And he said, well, I always remember you, James, because your jaw was in your lap. And when he was speaking, I thought, oh, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. This is an inclusive vision. This is a universal vision. This is something that this all resonates. This feels like home. This is what I've been looking for. Let me explore this more and more. And then I continued studying with Larry. And when he spoke about, I'd read the Yoga Sutras in translation. I'd read some translation or parts of some translations of the Gita. And then when he spoke about them, they all came just so alive. And that's when I realized I need to learn Sanskrit, because I knew from my previous time with French and Italian, like one of my favorite books is an Italian novel, but I've read it in Italian, I've read it in English. It's like two different books. I love them both, but the flavor and the things that stand out were different in the two languages. So I knew that between Sanskrit and English, I was missing so much. So I thought, let me try to create a more personal relationship with these teachings. And in order to do that, let me try to get access through the language. And teaching at the university, I was very fortunate that there was a Sanskrit department, and I was able to start with a wonderful teacher, a beautiful lady called Ajahn Tassani, who at that time had already been teaching for many decades, and very patient, very gracious, and also quite masterful. And that was where and after a while, I realized I need to go to India. And
So basically, Sanskrit brought you to India, we can say that.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I came, I was actually at that time thinking, oh, I need to go to the US to do a PhD with Sanskrit as part of the program, because that was that was the only way I had seen as being a possibility. That's my dad. That was the only way I recognized as a possibility of how I could actually continue studying Sanskrit. I hadn't had enough imagination to realize there are other ways.
Yes.
And so I met Dr. Jayashree from Mysore. I went to a yoga conference in Hong Kong, and I think a student of hers and a student who'd spend a lot of time in Mysore, he organized it, and he invited many teachers from Mysore. And one day I just walked into the end of this Yoga Sutras class, and I saw Jayashree and her cousin, and they seemed very open and ready to work with people from different backgrounds. And so I contacted her and said, oh, I have a bit of time. Could I come and do some Sanskrit? And she said, yes, come. Let's see what we can do. And then I came to India and stayed much longer than I'd initially booked to stay. And then after a couple of visits, I then started studying with the son of Jayashree's teacher, Dr. Alwar, Lakshmanjoo's son. And then I studied with Professor Rao as well. And they both encouraged me to then do the master's program there in India. So no need to go, if you want to study Sanskrit, why do you want to go somewhere else? And I realized for my interest, that was what was appropriate, because it wasn't that I wanted to do a PhD or I wanted to get to study South Asian history. I wanted to study Sanskrit so I could develop that relationship with the teachings encoded in the Yoga Sutra, in the Bhagavad Gītā, in the Ramayana. And so being in Mysore was a beautiful blessing for me. Yeah.
How did Kashmiri Shaivism happen to you?
It's the grace of the masters. I don't know. It's just so. It literally. I went to the yoga. So I was teaching at university in Bangkok. I was practicing yogasana pretty much every day. I was breathing. I was reading.
Yeah.
I guess I was praying in my own way. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. Maybe I was asking. I guess the way I was using my energy day to day was asking for something more. Maybe you might say that. And then I joined this trip, and I rolled up at the street where we were taking the minibus. I think it was 6 or 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and this man comes towards me. He was wearing a Superman t-shirt. He was 44 years old at that time. This was back in, I think, 2003. Or no, sometime around 2003 maybe. And that was Larry. And that night he gave that talk. And then what was happening was the teacher who'd organized that trip, Adrian Cox at Yoga Element Studio, he was starting a yoga teacher training program. And he'd not done it before. So he did like a pilot scheme to practice teaching that type of material, which I joined. And then I continued with the official program when that followed. And so what was very wonderful, for about 8 months, almost every Sunday, Larry gave satsang. And this included the kind of philosophy content of that teacher training program, but he gave these absolutely amazing talks. And it was so magical because Larry would give a talk on the Sunday evening. And he was also teaching us the Sangraha Stotra, a hymn, a devotional hymn that was one that Swami Lakshmanjoo particularly liked. And that was bringing in this flavor of Kashmiri recitation, which was also very, it felt somehow familiar, but it was very, I just loved it straight away. But he would give a talk, and then next morning I'm going to work, and boom, the teachings were just springing out at me from everywhere. And this would happen week after week.
Yeah.
And many magical things happened during that time. And after the program ended, the group kind of dispersed. Quite a few people actually moved away from Thailand, Thai people and some of the foreigners who'd been on the course. So the group that Larry had felt very comfortable with scattered.
Yeah, was not there.
But I stayed, I was still there working in Thailand for a few more years. And I continued studying with Larry for the next couple of years. We'd spent the next year going through the Yoga Sutra together. And then he also started to teach me Kashmiri Puja and more of the Kashmiri Shaiva, let's say, perspective. And sometimes with other people and sometimes with small groups. And then I introduced Larry to a friend of mine, Ellie. We set up a little Gita course. And then Ellie kind of, she and Larry have studied together for many years since. And we went to Kashmir. 2009 was my first time in Kashmir for Swami Lakshmanjoo's Havan. And that was a very, moving experience. Quite magical, quite beyond what words can really express. But the first time I went to the satsang hall there and we recited the puja that we normally do, it was just, something else. And then I learned some hymns that I'd never in this life sung before, but it was like, first time I hear it, I know this hymn. And just the flavor of the way that they sing during the ceremonies there. And one thing that was so beautiful for me, meeting all the people that I met who had lived around Swami Lakshmanjoo. And sometimes people have this idea of, in an ashram, it's this very codified or strict scenario or environment. And all the people were such characters. Everybody was utterly themselves, all so different and so alive. And this was, to me, was just very affirmative of what I'd felt and understood, to see it embodied in that. These were just beautiful human beings expressing their individuality with this quality of devotion and the love of life, the love of nature. And so I found that was what came to me as well. Like there's, there'd be people who their experience of Kashmir Shaivism is something completely different. But for me, I met people who were soaked with devotion in a way that really translated into how they related to their environment. And that, for me, was super inspiring. And it was very, I think maybe it was already alive in me, but it really kind of found a fire. And then that's kind of, I would say that's underlying and propelling a lot of what I have tried to share and continue to explore in the, ever since, really. But another beautiful, when I first came to Mysore and I met Lakshmi Tatacharya, his, a friend of mine called Anna, she was one of the last people he really mentored. She was doing a PhD and she took me to meet him. And I felt very privileged because he was such an amazing human being, such a dynamo and so full of life. Like I met him when he was 74 and he was so enthusiastic. He had this beautiful light and warmth about him. And so he listened to why I was motivated to study Sanskrit. And he said, I think, because he was a student of Ramanuja, but he also said how he felt. I mean, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but what I understood was that he recognized that this vision was really aiming in the same direction as the masters of his tradition. The real point is to live well and honor this gift of being a human being with a soul and with a conscience. Okay.
So You have moved in various fields, Sanskrit, yoga, Kashmiri Shaivism, Yoga Sūtra-s, Gita, Bhagavad Gītā, all of that. And you have moved in different languages, like speak few languages, read and write, and you yourself write poetry, read a lot of literature, everything. So you imbibe things from very many sources, so many, there's a lot of input. Take everything so much. So when you teach, because these are all part of being a student, but when we come to the James as a teacher, you amalgamate all of it and bring it as your own essence, or you keep things separately as they are? How do you do that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. It's interesting that sometimes when I'm in the role of the teacher, sometimes I say things that I didn't know whoa, how did that come through?
Yeah.
And sometimes I have the feeling that, if I place myself accordingly, then this lineage or the grace of the masters will come through in a way that I didn't expect. At the same time, I feel that let's say my apprenticeship to this vision of what's it all for? It's just to help us live well, to help us recover our innate capacity to actually live in harmony with each other and our planet, and honor the gifts of life. So I think deep down we know how to do this. So my let's say vocation, or the thing that I've apprenticed myself to, is I like languages, and I do this. I have this communication thing, so I want to use that. I want to place myself such that this can connect with people, and help them connect to something that's inside them, like to help remember something. So what I've noticed is that, because sometimes in my work I'll tell a lot of stories. Sometimes it'll be very like just presentation of philosophical principles. Some people really like certain aspects more than others. And so the way that a teaching comes through will vary tremendously depending on who's in the room, the context and the setting and all of that. But what I try to do is share from what's really alive in me. And I think because the foundation, let's say, goes back to that Kashmiri Shaiva universal inclusive vision, and because I have also found what for me is the very practical principles that are there in the Yoga Sutra, in the Bhagavad Gītā, that also get explained in Purāṇic stories, in Ramayana, these things that have really supported me, but also other teachings from many other traditions that grew up in England. So I was exposed to teachings of Jesus, and then I've explored been with other parts of the world. There's there are all these different things have infused. And for me, this was what I really felt when I went to live in Japan. It's like, wow, because some things work so well in Japan. I just thought, wow, we can learn from each other. So what I think I aspire to when I'm teaching is to demonstrate what I think is the yogic practice of actually looking beyond our habitual ways of looking. So can I bring things together honestly, and then bring them forth such that they are appropriate and useful to the situation I find myself in? But saying that, I definitely feel like I do read things through what I consider a yogic lens. So those principles that to me seem so practical, so robust, I do view things within that prism or that lens. So for example, I like movement things, and some of these movement teachers I've worked with, really, I think really they're teaching yoga. They might think of yoga as just some kind of physical practice, but for me, it's like, no, this is a means to work with all of life to foster greater balance and harmony. So I'm not sure I really answered the question there, but
No,
yeah,
you did.
Because also I think when I'm teaching, I have this, I feel like nobody can really teach anybody anything, but what we can aspire to is to facilitate a situation in which learning is more likely to occur. So I'm very conscious, and I think I noticed, for example, yesterday or the day I was talking to my sister, and I was talking in a kind of casual way, not really minding what I said. And I wasn't communicating particularly skillfully.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm sitting in the seat of the teacher, I really make more of a conscious effort.
Yes.
To be an invitation, to communicate in a way that is an invitation. Because to me, that's what really works. I certainly don't like being told you have to do this or you should do that.
Yes.
And that way is no good. You have to do it this way. It's like, I think when we're invited to recognize, to grasp it in our own authentic way, then we can really take it on. And that's when change can really occur.
Yeah.
So I feel like when sitting in the seat or in the role of the teacher, I have to really let me, as far as I possibly can, be the invitation. And in order for me to be the invitation, I have to get out of my own way. I have to get out of my own insecurities or my own fears. And when that happens, then I think we can create. Because I often feel like good teaching, like when I first coached basketball to younger kids when I was 16, and I had a wonderful experience. And I realized it was yoga. I didn't think of it in those terms when I was 16, but it was like, I was really into basketball. I was thinking about it all the time. Yeah. I'd been well coached. And then I started coaching the younger students. I was really into it. They were motivated. Yes. And basketball was this thing around which we gathered our attention, our powers of awareness, and we grew and learned together. And so to me, that's the beauty of good teaching. It's like we're actually learning together, we're exploring together. So whatever is the lens, the thing we're inquiring into, this becomes the means for the yoga. So in the yoga work that I often do, we're exploring yoga principles through a text or through story or mythology, or maybe in physical practice or with regard to different techniques. Or we're just coming together to sing. And when we come together to sing, very simply, we become part of this shared voice. And we can actually experience, when I give myself permission to be in this process with others who can show me I won't be able to see for myself, then I can really learn, I can expand. And this is something that I'm really feeling. I really feel there's this deep hunger for the sense of a community or a village where I will be witnessed and supported by others who can show me my blind spots as I do for them. And in good faith, we witness and support each other. But I feel like the teaching space that I want to try to do my best to share is actually a microcosm of that. It's like it's a place in which the emphasis is on openness, transparency, sharing authentically. Like we've got permission to be naked, to be ourselves. Like there's nothing, we can say whatever you want to say. What's really important now in the context of our lives and experience, and use the teachings as a support to go into that. So
that's wonderful. I hope that community comes up soon, because
I mean, this is what I've found. Like now it's a bit, I'm in this situation now where all around where I would travel and teach, and when I would spend time in Mysore, I would experience this. I would have a little slice of this community, but it was in a transient way. I was like going around sharing this, helping provide, but also stepping into a vibrant setting where that was also a little bit easier. So in Mysore, for example, I would give the kirtans and have satsangs at my place, and there's a lot of energy that developed over the years. But also in Mysore, there's a long history of people going there who are seeking, who are inquiring, and in the culture of the land itself, and the Indian tradition. And people like you are there all the time, tending those flames of inquiry. So, and then when traveling, where I was invited by people who are doing that work and they want to bring a little bit more of this into their community. And then as I've been more in one place, I feel like how to do that, how to create that here, where to place myself. But I just feel this, the circle, you know, like this idea that I'm a human being, I've got two eyes, there's way more I cannot see than I can. But if we get together in a circle, we might have truths in the center, we can all, each of us just see a part of it. But when we share in that type of honest conversation that is not adversarial, it's not like this reductive ism-schism, binary, divide and rule. It's like, no, let's listen with all of ourselves. When I share, let me share whatever is emerging. Maybe we'll surprise ourselves, but the other people's perspectives can show me things that I would not see myself. And that's the other thing that I think the way that I try to teach has shown to me. In the yoga tradition, there is at once a great emphasis, I would say, on this independence. Someone takes responsibility for one's own vision and one's own practice. But that practice is always in relationship, in connection to everything else. So I'm feeling this, I want more of this community and this in real, earnest, honest conversation. Because in the last year, I find the lack of what to me just seems, why are we not prepared to really be honest about the situation and say, we don't know, to know that we don't know. And I think that's a really great place to start exploring from, to know that we don't know, then we're open to discover things that maybe would be more beautiful than we would ever have dared dream.
The moment we say don't know, we have opened the door to know. Explore to, but somehow we feel that saying I don't know makes us smaller or something. I don't know, whatever it is, because also we haven't been allowed to say I don't know.
No, I've been reflecting that this is kind of it's a symptom of this, I don't even want to call it a culture or a system that wants to try to control life and control nature. Whereas, like, to me, the yoga tradition, it reminds us, look, we are nature. We were born, we will die. In between, we will experience change. Life is beautiful and powerful and mysterious. And if we get fixated on trying to control it, we're just cheating ourselves, because it's never going to work. But if we acknowledge that, wow, I'm privileged to be able to witness this mystery, then I can be in a relationship of respect and joy with it, instead of trying to dominate it and control it, which is only going to do harm, right, in the long term. So to me, this is the way that we've been functioning as a species, the system, trying to control, trying to dominate, it doesn't work. Can we instead dance with life? And if I want to dance, I need to be receptive and present, but also respectful. Not like, you're going to move this way. No, like, how do we need to move together? And to me, this is the great beauty of the Indian tradition. To me, it hasn't forgotten what we knew thousands of years ago. Like, sometimes people talk about, like, I was encountering recently the writings of this lady, Rianne Eisler. And she wrote a book called The Chalice and the Blade, and she talks about the dominance model of society and the partnership model. And saying that in prehistory, the partnership model was predominant. It made me think, does that correspond with the yugas? And that thousands of years ago, we knew how to be in relative balance and harmony with each other. We knew how to cooperate with nature and with each other. And then there's all this idea, life's a battle and nature's red in tooth and claw. It's like, that's not the whole picture. But to me, the Indian tradition, in a very vital way, that's still very alive and very present. And many people, when I first went to India, one of my friends says, Mother India once she calls you, she will start giving you the teachings you need. They won't be what you expect. But
some of them may like it, some of them may not like it.
yeah, but she has a, you know, to me, this is Mother Nature. Yeah. Like she is howling, it seems to me right now. And only a person who is fixated in this desire to try to control and dominate, that can blinker us to the possibilities and the abundance that's actually around, because the intelligence of nature is so much vaster than we can grasp with our minds.
Yes. And for me, the more I see us as humans, when I say us, I'm including me as a bigger part. We were intelligent. Now we have become smart. And in that transition, how it has happened, but I don't know how. I also somehow, I think I know how, but the transition now, being cunning, being manipulative is the cool thing now. I don't know what cool thing is this about, but we have lost our intelligence. It was there so much for us, and now we have become smart.
Yeah.
That smartness is like how I'm going to get more than you or anybody. So,
and that's not intelligent.
That's not intelligent.
Because, yeah.
That's definitely not intelligent. That is being smart. That is being cunning.
Yeah.
For me, we have learned how to be smart. Street smart, business smart, all kinds of smartness. But we don't know the joy of intelligence, the growth which the intelligence brings, and the belongingness.
Yeah.
So, hopefully we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Coming back to just us, like you basically, which one comes to you closest, like a teaching or learning, like being a student or being a teacher? Because I have been asked this question many times.
Well, I think I definitely, even in my teaching work, I really aspire to studentship. You know, one of the things I think the reason that I teach is because I like learning.
Yes.
And teaching, for me, teaching is the best way to learn deeply the things I most need to learn.
Exactly. That's how I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always feel like sometimes I'm invited to speak to yoga teacher training groups, and what I say varies depending on each time. But one thing I always try to remember to fit in and emphasize, and what's the most important qualification to be a teacher is to be a student, always.
Yeah.
But I had very beautiful, when I taught at the university in Thailand, for example, even when I was teaching the schools in Japan and Thailand, but at the university, it was really powerful. Like, wow, man, the students taught me so much by the way they interacted with the materials. And that was really inspiring time, just to see like, wow, when we learn together, I may be in the role of the teacher, but my teacher, Larry, who I mentioned earlier, he always says the teacher always gets more. When you're the one who is facilitating, who is presenting, who has to kind of lay things out or set things up, you'll always get more. So if you're presenting the material, obviously, like when I give courses, I prepare, and then I prepare to be spontaneous, but the preparation then means that I'm reminding myself of what I need to remember. But I don't think one can be a teacher if one's not a student. So I think the studentship is foundational, and then the teaching is something that can happen. Because I think also we're all teachers, whether we recognize it or not, like the way we move, the way we interact with people. And this is something I need to remind myself of, is that sometimes, for example, I move in places where I feel I'm seeing or experiencing ways of interaction or energy that I feel like, oh man, we could do so much better. But who knows what influence it might make? Like I gave an example years back, when I lived in Thailand, I did the Art of Living course, the Sri Ravi Shankar course.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was one, he was an Indian gentleman that we were working with, and I think he brought the question of what difference can I make? And then I gave this example which I'd seen, and it was on a street in Thailand, and there was some litter, and a child picked up the litter and put it in the bin. And I saw this adult see the child, and I could see on the face of the adult this feeling of almost shame. Why didn't I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so who knows? Maybe that adult then went home and then took their child out litter picking. Who knows? So I think we're always really teaching, whether and we're teaching ourselves, like the force of habit.
Yes, yes.
So that's to me why studentship is so, if I don't have the attitude, I need to be alert, I need to be attentive, I need to have that curiosity to keep learning, it can become very easy to get entrenched in patterns that develop a lot of inertia over time, a lot of tamas, which is an intrinsic force of reality. So in order to move through that studentship, I feel, is so foundational. And to me, that's also encoded into the yoga method, is to know I don't know, and to keep inquiring, and to be the student. And it gives, I feel, a very robust and time-tested, time-proven structure for ongoing inquiry.
Yeah. So another thing I would like to know is, I have seen it and you have seen it also. Many times, many students come along, many. They get excited, they want to learn, they want to study, they start very well. Some, of course, there will always be dropouts. That I am not going to go in that direction, but some want to continue, want to go to that end point of the whole process of studying, whatever it is. But they start to lose hold, or start to lose the interest, or things like that. Maybe they need a constant motivation, they feel a bit lost, or things like that. When you see somebody like that, you know that they are sincere enough, but it doesn't take them further. How do you help them?
There's a number of things come to mind. So there's three things that I would like to definitely mention. So one is this sensation of what I've experienced many times with people who come along and they have a great experience, and if that is not repeated soon enough, sometimes it can be very disturbing. So just to give an example of this, for example, one time I gave a class, it was a movement class, and most of the people who came were older ladies. And I had them rolling around on the ground and no yoga mats.
Yeah.
And they were all very like, oh, this was in England, they were all very like, oh. But at the end of the class, they were all smiling and they were like, wow, I did all these things I would never experienced. And it was a fundraising event. And the next year, my friend, who was for her child, we were going to do it again. And many of the people, they said, oh, will he do a more conventional class? Can we use mats?
Yeah.
But they felt amazing when they went outside the comfort zone. But because they didn't go outside the comfort zone again quickly, then because this new input was shaking the mind-ego construct. And so when they had the validating, encouraging experience of, oh, it feels great, it gives us that impetus to keep going. But if we don't repeat it regularly enough, then the status quo, let's say, the desire for homeostasis rebels, and the mind-ego plays it will create all sorts of fancy, smart arguments why we don't need to do that.
Yes, yes.
So I think that can be one thing. And the other thing that I've encountered, and in that case, the remedy is that community, is that support. Let's because once there are others, then we'll have our ups and downs. So when we keep exploring together, and there is that sense of shared ethos and shared exploration and the spirit of inquiry, then we can support each other. When those periods of like, actually, I'm being invited to a new threshold. And I think the other thing about this is what often happens is the first threshold, or the first 2, 3, 4 thresholds, are ones we know we need to break through because we're sick of the old way, and we know we are. But then the new level of integration brings to the surface things that we previously had preferred to ignore because don't want to go into all that. That's just so, those old wounds. And again, I think it's really the container of a community that really helps the most. And then the other thing is that sometimes people talk about, you get, let's say, if we think of the whole process as 100%, we get the greatest transformation and the greatest rush of endorphins and neurochemical reward when we make the first breakthroughs. 80%. And then the remaining 20%, we're not going to get there by working 20 times as hard. Then the patient game takes over. And so for me, the real key is it's never about, I have the transform your life method. You just do this and then it's done. It's about creating a way of being in the world. This is why yoga is I think it's so great, because it's all of life, how I relate to myself, to others, to the environment. It's an ethical way of being in the world. And this ethos then prepares us for these inevitable moments where we will feel doubt or we will feel a lack of motivation. So the yogic vision or the yogic map tells us that on the map, there are these unknown places and you have to go through them. So I think this is why I feel that the yogic method, why I want to try to do more to share it, because I think it really prepares us for these periods where we think, again, I've still got to go through this. Because another thing that can happen is people can go through some threshold, make some breakthroughs, make some change, and then think, I just need a breather. And then, no, it's like I heard Robert Svoboda saying, his teachers say, the more you practice, the harder your life's going to get, because you're basically wanting to clear your karmas. So you're asking for trouble. Like I sometimes say, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. What am I praying for? I'm praying for peace. But what does that mean? It means I'm asking to remove the blockages and the things in myself that would block me experiencing peace. I'm asking for trouble. And can I pacify? Can I transform the inner conflict into a dance? So I need to face those tendencies within me that would be forbidding or intimidating. And again, it comes down to having some type of support structure. So an understanding that that's how it is, like let's say the yogic theory is one really helpful element. The other is a habit that connects us on multiple levels to why we're doing it. So what I think sometimes happens, let's say a person loves doing asana or loves doing some physical discipline, or they love playing music, or they love meditating. Sooner or later, we'll come to a plateau. So if the practice is also calibrated at the mental, intellectual, physical, emotional, relational level, it will withstand the plateau. But if I'm putting all my eggs in the sitting by myself meditating basket, or the doing my particular style of asana basket, or the jnana inquiry basket, during those barren periods, I think that's when I'm more likely to fall off. But if I can have the karma, the jnana, the bhakti, like the active learning, the inquiry, and that remembering, this is for something more than I can possibly know, and have a means to connect to that, then it becomes more robust. So I feel like what I think was a wonderful blessing for me was the way that I was taught when I first encountered yoga. I was invited into experiences that were transcendent in the sense that they brought me into an experience of like, and so there was this, it's obliterated some of my limiting ideas. And then my mind witnessed that. And so it knew, this is the game. It's like, when I come to this point,
yeah,
I can remember, actually, yeah, but I know this is going to be worthwhile. This is just the nature of transformation. And then being presented in a way that it was always holistic. It wasn't about a technique.
yes.
My teacher used to say, all the techniques, ultimately, the aim is to leave them behind and reside in what they're intended to take you to. So I feel sometimes people get overly enamored with techniques or programs, and there's a lot of people selling these things, and to me, it's like, no, it's about how I show up day to day, and techniques are just intended to help me understand the principles that relate to all of life. So I think that principle-based approach is also helped a lot by some type of community, because each of us will have a different configuration of the different elements. So our mutual friend Thomas, for example, is a person who has a great discipline. But when we're together, it's always a joy to be with him. And when I do kirtan a lot, when Thomas is in the room, I enjoy it even more. But it's like when we're together, we're similar and we're very different. So
Yes.
the very different things, they can really encourage us and help remind us of the things that it's not so easy to remember for each of us. And I've seen this since I was a child. Like when I was a boy, I had a friend who grew up just around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
It was like some of the things that he knew, I didn't. I had to struggle to learn them. And some of the things that I knew, he only could learn them by hurting himself. It's like,
Yep.
And so again, I think a robust structure, and this is why I think the yogic method in its holistic manifestation is so valuable, because it's been proven, and it was time tested for thousands of years before it was distilled into the Yoga Sutra or the Bhagavad Gītā. Like, it works. And then if we have friends, colleagues, a satsang, a community of people who are honest, or who are, let's say, sincere enough to give genuine support, that's the thing that would make the real difference. Because, like, for example, I heard recently somebody saying, psilocybin mushrooms, psychedelics, this is going to save humanity. And I'm like, no, it isn't. These can be tremendously helpful if they are given to somebody who has the overlying or underarching support structure of daily practice. Like I remember when our friend Mirana was talking about ayahuasca. He said, you drink ayahuasca once a year, once every 2 years. Otherwise, it's daily practice. This is just to help infuse your practice with that extra bit of information. It's not the practice. It's a support. And I think that's what I find so distinctive about the yogic method, is that it is this holistic, day in, day out structure. And when we explore it, it really invites us into it. Well, how can I build a satsang within myself and within my community? But that's a great question, Kumar. How can we help
that's
ourselves?
Wonderful. No, that's a very helpful way, what you said, because I have seen it in my own life, and I have seen so many times it has happened. Like, we create a discipline. Many of us, we create a discipline, and we will say, one day it's not going to make a big difference, and we break the discipline, and that's it. And by the time you come back, it takes like such a round about the globe. So it's the uncompromising lifestyle, or the discipline, and your integrity to hold it, and no matter what, keep going.
That's why I feel the ethos is so important, because sometimes when people hear that, they can think, but it doesn't mean doing the same, spending however many hours a day doing X. It's like the real discipline is adaptable and robust, so it can meet life. So for example, when my mother was dying, and when she died, after she died, there were so many things to do. And so I didn't have the time that I'd had not very long before to do certain things, but I felt I'm practicing doing this. So I think that's what the beauty of the yogic method is. If we really give ourselves to the discipline,
Yeah.
the underlying structure, the underlying principles are revealed to us more and more, and we can embody it. So then life becomes the practice.
That's very true.
And
Yeah.
the discipline, then we can, let's say, we can bring that uncompromising integrity into a reality in which compromise is part of daily life.
Yes.
And there's no interruption to that uncompromising commitment to practice, even as we are adapting to the challenges or needs of the day. And to me, that is the dance. That's the real practice. That's the you know, how much, some of my friends talk about, you know, like santosha, contentment. Well, it's very easy. Oh, I'll just be, and tapas, like, so some of us have a tendency to be overly hard or to be overly
Relax.
So,
neither is not going to happen.
It's yoga is always the sweet spot. It's always the balance. It's always the marriage of these seemingly opposed qualities that can actually bring out each other's beauty and complementary potential.
Wonderful. Beautifully said. James, my God, like 1 hour passed just like that. Wish I could talk more, like a bit more, but we have to cut it the time limit. So I'm really, really from the heart, I thank you